Sheep grazing is both a cultural and economic activity. Sheep products like wool, meat, and milk are extensively used in our daily lives. Sheep farming also supports rural livelihoods. This is true in Iceland and across the whole of the North Atlantic region, which includes Norway, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and Scotland. In this region, sheep grazing has shaped landscapes and biodiversity for centuries. However, the sustainability of this practice has been questioned, because there are many examples of grazing associated with environmental degradation. Sheep grazing in this region is practiced extensively and without herding. These practices vary slightly between the different countries, but in general, sheep are brought to the rangelands in the mountains at the beginning of the summer. They graze freely until they are rounded up and returned to the farms at the end of the summer. In Iceland, the annual Réttir takes place in early September, and it is an exciting family event. But we cannot forget that sheep are herbivores, animals that eat plants. As such, they have impacts on the plants they eat, but also on the whole ecosystem. The impacts of herbivores on ecosystems are related to a complex set of factors, including the herbivore itself, the plants they eat, and the environmental conditions in which they live. And of course, the impacts of sheep grazing will also depend on how we manage them, how many sheep we have, how early we bring them up to the mountains, and how long they stay on the rangelands. To provide a short overview of plant-herbivore interactions in northern ecosystems, we have Professor David Hick from Simon Fraser University in Canada.
Herbivores are animals that eat plants. Whether they're small like a caterpillar or large like a sheep, they play important roles in processes that determine the functioning of both natural and managed ecosystems. First, by consuming plants, and second, by being food for predators, herbivores represent a central link in the flow of energy and the cycling of nutrients in nature. For example, imagine a goose in summer eating grass. The plant provides the goose with energy and nutrients, nourishment that allows it to grow and reproduce. But some of the energy and nutrients will ultimately be transferred to the next trophic level when a fox comes and eats the goose. However, there's much more to the story than that. Herbivores directly affect the plants they eat. By consuming green plant biomass, herbivores can have negative impacts on plants. However, because grazing rarely kills the plants, they are also able to respond to being eaten. Some plants, such as grasses, can even increase their growth rates in response to moderate levels of herbivory. By selectively eating some plants and not others, herbivores often change the structure and composition of plant communities. These changes can have far-reaching consequences for the productivity and diversity of grazed ecosystems. As well, herbivores trample on plants and provide them with natural fertilizers. Trampling by large herbivores can disrupt vegetation cover, opening patches of bare ground where new plants can grow. And with their dung, herbivores transport seeds and nutrients across landscapes. The impacts of herbivores will of course depend on the environmental conditions. In colder regions, temperature limits plant growth, and in these areas there is marked seasonality, essentially a cold winter and a warm summer. It's only during these relatively warm summers that plants can grow and reproduce. Therefore, cold regions tend to have lower plant productivity. So here, herbivores have to deal with relatively low food availability, and these animals have a variety of adaptations to cope with these conditions. In wild populations, herbivores are regulated by the availability of plants and by predators. The availability of food, which is usually most limited during winter, sets an upper limit to the number of herbivores that we can have in an ecosystem. This is called the carrying capacity. When we're talking about managed or domestic herbivore populations, the carrying capacity of an ecosystem can be easily exceeded. This is a problem, and it's particularly a problem associated with domestic herbivores that are supplemented with food throughout the winter. When herbivores are decoupled from natural resource availability, we may end up with unsustainably high numbers. This increases the likelihood of overgrazing, which can deplete plant resources and alter community structure. The chances of overgrazing will depend on the environmental conditions and how plants respond to grazing. Some places will be more sensitive than others to increased numbers of herbivores.
Herbivores are thus important components of northern ecosystems, but their impacts are not the same everywhere. Many aspects need to be taken into account, from environmental conditions to management practices that can lead to excessively high numbers of herbivores. In the next section, we will discuss the environmental conditions of Iceland to understand how these can affect the ecological impacts of sheep grazing.